In 2017, a company that rented desks convinced the world's most sophisticated investors it was worth $47 billion. More than Ford, more than Delta Airlines, more than FedEx. WeWork's charismatic founder, Adam Neumann, didn't just sell office space, he sold salvation, transforming mundane real estate into a mystical movement complete with tequila-fueled rituals and promises to elevate the world's consciousness. 2 years later, the fastest-growing startup in American history would collapse in spectacular fashion, exposing not just one man's delusions of grandeur, but the entire machinery of an industry that had learned to mistake magic tricks for innovation. The prophet of We emerged from unlikely origins, a 6'5" Israeli immigrant with wild hair, magnetic eyes, and an accent that somehow made vague pronouncements sound profound. Adam Neumann arrived in New York with little more than charisma and conviction, but those proved to be the only currencies that mattered in the venture capital gold rush of the 2010s. In 2010, Neumann and his partner Miguel McKelvey opened their first shared workspace in Manhattan's Soho district. What separated WeWork from countless other co-working spaces wasn't the product, it was the profit. Neumann didn't pitch office rentals, he preached transformation. He spoke of elevating the world's consciousness, of creating a generation of fulfilled workers, of building communities that would reshape capitalism itself. Investors leaned in, mesmerized. The warning signs flickered early. Neumann strutted into meetings barefoot, smoked marijuana on private jets, and made decisions based on mystical numerology rather than market analysis. He renamed a building because it contained the word meat, and he'd recently become interested in vegetarianism. He trademarked the word we and sold it back to his own company for nearly $6 million. These weren't quirks, they were symptoms of dangerous narcissism. But in Silicon Valley's intoxicating climate, red flags looked like revolutionary thinking. SoftBank's Masayoshi son met Neumann for just 28 minutes before committing $4.4 billion. The prophet had found his true believers, and the congregation was about to grow exponentially. The billion-dollar handshake happened in a Manhattan conference room in 2017, where two men high on their own visions met and decided to reshape reality. Masayoshi's son, the eccentric Japanese billionaire behind SoftBank's $100 billion vision fund, sat across from Adam Neumann for exactly 28 minutes. No spreadsheets were analyzed, no due diligence was conducted. Son simply looked at Neumann and declared his energy was infectious. Then he committed $4.4 billion. Son didn't just invest in WeWork, he became intoxicated by it. He told Neumann to think bigger, to stop being so conservative, to embrace his destiny as a generational leader. When Neumann proposed expanding to 80 countries, Son pushed for 200. When financial projections showed mounting losses, Son dismissed them as irrelevant details. The Vision Fund operated on a different mathematics, one where energy mattered more than economics, where charisma counted more than cash flow. The valuation became pure fantasy. WeWork was now worth $20 billion, then $30 billion, then an astonishing $47 billion by 2019. The company leased buildings long-term and rented desks short-term, a model with razor-thin margins that collapsed during any economic downturn. Competitors like Regus had operated for decades without reaching even a fraction of WeWork's valuation. But Neumann convinced Son that WeWork wasn't a real estate company. It was a technology platform, a lifestyle brand, a movement. The intoxication spread. Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and other prestigious institutions lined up to service the cult. Employees received stock options that paper-made them millionaires. Neumann bought a 600-acre property and a $60 million private jet. The prophet was living like a king, and his disciples celebrated every excess as proof of visionary thinking. Reality had become negotiable. Mathematics had become optional. The only thing that mattered was belief. The Temple of Excess rose in glass and steel across 328 locations worldwide, each one a shrine to Neumann's vision of communal transcendence. But inside WeWork's headquarters, the company operated less like a business and more like a movement demanding total devotion. Employees didn't just work, they believed. They chanted company mantras at all-hands meetings. They attended mandatory retreats where Neumann preached about consciousness and purpose, while passing around tequila shots at 10 in the morning. The corporate cult behavior became increasingly bizarre. Summer camp, WeWork's annual employee gathering, transformed into Burning Man meets corporate retreat. Thousands of employees descended on sprawling estates in England and upstate New York for multi-day festivals featuring concerts, workshops, and Neumann's rambling speeches about changing the world. Attendance wasn't optional. The message was clear. Devotion to WeWork meant devotion to a lifestyle, a philosophy, a religion. Mandatory fun became a control mechanism. Employees were expected to drink with executives, to party after midnight, to blur the lines between personal and professional until nothing existed outside the WeWork universe. Those who questioned the culture were labeled as lacking the right energy, as not being team players, as failing to grasp the mission. Dissent became heresy. Meanwhile, the company incinerated cash with breathtaking speed. WeWork lost $700 million in 2016, then $933 million in 2017, then $1.9 billion in 2018. The losses weren't slowing, they were accelerating. For every dollar WeWork earned, it spent two. Neumann's solution wasn't efficiency, it was expansion. More locations, more employees, more private jets, more excess. The temple kept growing, the faithful kept believing, and the profit kept spending. Neumann purchased 5 homes worth $80 million. He installed a sauna on his private jet. He brought his personal surfboard instructor to company events. The delirium had reached fever pitch, and no one dared suggest the party might end. The Book of Revelations arrived on August 14, 2019, when WeWork filed its S-1 document with the Securities and Exchange Commission. For years, the company had operated in private darkness where believers controlled the narrative. Now, under the harsh light of regulatory disclosure, the world could finally see what had been hidden behind the curtain. Wall Street's awakening was swift and brutal. Analysts opened the 300-page filing expecting a technology unicorn and found a real estate company hemorrhaging money at unprecedented scale. The numbers told a devastating story. $1.9 billion lost in 2018 on revenue of just $1.8 billion. WeWork wasn't approaching profitability, it was sprinting away from it. But the financial carnage was just the beginning. The S-1 exposed Neumann's self-dealing in excruciating detail. He had leased buildings he personally owned back to WeWork. He had borrowed $500 million from the company using his own stock as collateral. He maintained super voting shares, giving him complete control. He had even sold the We trademark to his own company for nearly $6 million. The emperor's new clothes had finally been revealed as nothing but air and arrogance. Institutional investors recoiled. The media, once enchanted by Neumann's charisma, turned savage. Within days, WeWork's proposed valuation began collapsing. The $47 billion fantasy met reality, and reality was unforgiving. The cult's sacred text had become its death warrant. The golden parachute deployed on September 24, 2019, when Adam Neumann stepped down as CEO after investors finally revolted. The IPO had been canceled. The valuation had cratered from $47 billion to $8 billion in mere weeks. WeWork was hemorrhaging cash and spiraling toward bankruptcy, but the prophet who had led his followers into the wilderness wouldn't suffer with them. SoftBank, desperate to salvage its investment, orchestrated a bailout that rewarded failure with obscene generosity. Neumann walked away with $1.7 billion, nearly $2 billion when including previous stock sales. He received a consultant fee of $46 million annually. SoftBank even agreed to purchase his private jet. The man who had incinerated billions in other people's money departed wealthier than ever. The inequality of consequences was staggering. While Neumann counted his billions, 19,000 employees faced mass layoffs. 2,400 people lost their jobs in November alone. Their stock options, once promised as life-changing wealth, became worthless paper. The faithful who had believed in the mission, who had worked 100-hour weeks, who had sacrificed relationships and health for the cause, they got severance packages and shattered dreams. The enablers escaped unscathed too. SoftBank's Masayoshi son faced no personal financial ruin. Investment bankers collected their fees. Board members who had enabled Neumann's excesses simply moved on to other ventures. The cult had collapsed, but only the congregation paid the price. The leaders ascended to safety, leaving devastation below. The reckoning should have changed everything. WeWork's implosion exposed the dangerous machinery behind Silicon Valley's reality distortion field. how charisma could override mathematics, how enablers could profit from delusion, how thousands could suffer while leaders escaped unscathed. The lessons were written in billions of dollars of destroyed value and thousands of shattered careers. But Silicon Valley has a remarkable talent for amnesia. Within months, venture capitalists were funding the next generation of unprofitable unicorns with identical fervor. SoftBank continued deploying billions into companies that prioritize growth over fundamentals. Charismatic founders still commanded valuations that defied logic. The system that created WeWork remained intact, hungry for the next profit with the right energy and the wrong business model. Neumann himself never truly disappeared. He launched a new venture, naturally attracting hundreds of millions in funding. The man who had presided over one of history's most spectacular corporate failures was welcomed back as a visionary who had simply been ahead of his time. The narrative had been rewritten. The cult had been rebranded. WeWork survived in diminished form, eventually going public through a SPAC merger at a fraction of its peak valuation. But the real story wasn't about one company's rise and fall. It was about a system designed to reward delusion and punish truth-tellers, where consequences remain optional for those at the top. The temple had crumbled, but the faithful were already building the next one, convinced this time would be different. Adam Neumann walked away with billions while his company burned. It's a story of unchecked ego, but what happens when corporate greed doesn't just cost money, but lives? If you want to see how Boeing sacrificed 346 people to save money on software training, you need to watch our investigation into the 737 MAX scandal. This was business unmasked. See you in the next dossier.